Great to see you all coming together to watch the panel. So we've got around 15, 20 people already, so I'm going to get started, and I'm sure others will join in. But first of all, thank you very much for joining today's discussion. It's quite a big topic, rethinking global mobility. And I'm really lucky to be joined by a fantastic selection of speakers today from all around the world. We've got Fiona Mujno from France, Marco Mazzetschi from Italy, Juliana Ruiz in Brazil, Kunle in Nigeria. We were due to have Alistair Murray join us as well. I'm sure many of us know Alistair very well. He had to pull out at the last minute, so he does send his wishes to you all, and he's really keen to continue the discussion if we speak more about this in the future. But we are going to honour his contributions, and I would like to thank Alistair for all that he has done to take part so far. So probably a lot of you are wondering what this is all about. I mean, what is rethinking global mobility? I'll be honest with you that the plan was to write quite a provocative title, the one that would potentially capture your attention and spark your curiosity, because I think that's always important. And just to give you some background before I pass it on to the speakers, I came about this idea because through a lot of the time that I've spent on LinkedIn and social media in the last 5 or 6 months, the narrative has often been about updates and what's happening in the here and now and what are we doing in the moment just to keep going, really. Or it's been about what are we going to do in the future. People are talking about adapting, or that word pivot, which we hear so often. But what I think has not been discussed, and what I think is really interesting, is looking at it from a different perspective. What ideas could we come up with if we were to start a brand new narrative, create a new narrative around global mobility? What if we were to start from an entirely blank page? What would we be thinking about? What would the priorities be? What ideas could we come up with about what really matters in global mobility? I know many of you watching and all the panelists, we aren't just driven by financial gains. We actually want to make a difference. And now is a really good opportunity to do that. We do also have to be realistic, and we need to be financially viable and continue our business, of course. But this is a fantastic opportunity to consider alternatives. And I think the best way to do this is to start by looking at where we are now and where we were in the past. And I think the first place to start and the best place to start is, and logically in terms of our panelists, is where we are in global mobility now. And there is a divide, you know, there are so many services in global mobility. It's huge. We have relocation, we have immigration, we have tax. But we don't always get on. We don't always agree. And sometimes we actually look at the other side and think they are making it a bit more difficult for us to service our clients. So I want to start now. I've probably waffled on for a bit too long. And I think the logical person to begin with is Juliana. Juliana, I think she'll come up.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Juliana. Good to see you. Now, I'll be honest with you. I have a problem with people like you. Because you are, if I'm right, an immigration partner, immigration qualified, you're tax qualified, your firm offer relocation services and also potentially corporate housing as well. So I don't know if there was ever a civil war in global mobility, what side you would be on. but I do think you can offer some useful insight into the discussion. And I wonder what your initial thoughts are and comments are in terms of what we can do to move forward and thrive in a new era of global mobility.
Okay, thank you, Ben, for this opportunity. And yes, as you mentioned, we have to accept the situation that we are living now. So we, in my opinion, there is no going back to before. So everything we have been talking about the last 10 or 15 years has been heightened now. And we are in a phase of adaptation, right? We know there is a pandemic here. We know we need to face it, but we still have to have the human side to keep the balance between the automation of the process and the way we deliver the services. So in my opinion, we rely much more for the technology, okay, to deliver the service, but we can't be consumed by it. So for our industry, we need this personal touch. We need to be careful because we are talking about the movement of people when it requires the human side, the understanding of human being. So I can give you an example. At Relocation House, we offer like virtual tours for home finding for our clients. We know this is a way to deliver the services. We know this is adaptation of the services. This is the way we can do it now. But at the same time, we have to find the balance because we need to understand their body language. We still need the necessity of the face-to-face to meet them, to understand their needs and so on. So I think this is a very huge discussion. And of course, we have a lot content to share and to bring ideas and new possibilities on how to keep and to find this balance between the technology, of course, that is very important to us more now than ever, but keeping this human side and this this you know the way we care about our client.
Great, thanks very much, Juliana. And I think your firm does that really well. I see that you utilize technology and tools like Instagram, but also focus on the well-being side. So I think that's important. Thanks for your input on that. I'd like to bring in Marco into the conversation. First of all, welcome, Marco. I think this is the first time we've had you at a Euro conference or Euro discussion. Just for anyone that doesn't know Marco, he is the leading Italian immigration lawyer in Italy. And he's had a lot of experience. But what I'd like to get from Marco's side of things is, in terms of moving forward, what we don't do too much about is we utilize data in terms of providing services to clients. But I think data and looking at things scientifically, if we want to assess the future, is important. And I'd like to know your thoughts on that, Marco, in terms of how you do that and what you're doing at the moment to kind of look to the future.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, it's my first time at Euro. I'm very pleased and honored to speak today. Yes, we are a small firm, but I was very excited when I started reading a lot about artificial intelligence. So what we try to do is to put a chat box for answering the initial queries. We receive quite a lot of initial queries through the internet, through our website. And then after a few months, we gave up. I don't think for the time being in countries like Italy, where fortunately for us as practitioners, we live on nuances. I mean, if I know many practitioners around the world. When I listened that in the United States, they have 180 more or less kind of visas. Everything is more categorized. In Italy, we live on nuances. So having a chat box answering the initial queries for a prospective client, you can make a screening, but you can lose opportunities. So I gave up on that idea. On the other way, I still think that is inevitable for any firm. It will be sooner or later to start using more and more artificial intelligence, especially when countries, governments themselves will implement this kind of system. And I want to make some example. I've read a lot in the last few months. United Nations has already commissioned a system for predicting immigration flows from Africa, taking into account things like weather, demographic growth, political situation. And on the test they did, the accuracy is like 80%, you know. University, I think Berkeley University, they developed an algorithm to help resettling refugees and help their integration. The European Union has commissioned a team of researchers to make a system which will analyze micro gestures of people crossing the border to help the border police to understand if they are lying or not. a team of Oxford University researchers has developed a system which predicts with very high accuracy the outcome of real life human rights cases. And there are many, many examples. So what is my personal thing is that in our small scale as a firm, but we need to analyze more the data that we collect from clients. I'm not talking about sensitive data, but we can more or less predict as a firm what can happen in a 6 months time in terms of growth of work. For example, work can disappear. Not only making a prediction as an experience or seasoned, like myself and Fiona, we are seasoned practitioners. So having a crystal ball and try to predict what is the growth, what will be our business in the next year or so. But analyzing data is more and more important, and there are more and more tools that without investing tons of money, which help any firms to make a more predictable choices. So I think that's machine learning, big data, artificial intelligence is something that we know it is something there to stay. And more when no longer the application in one country where you apply, even in Italy, we are lucky again for the language. But imagine in 10 years' time, when there will be an online application will be reviewed by a machine, not by a human. The fact that this machine is helping you to file the application and not a human will definitely be helpful and necessary. So it's something that is here to stay and will grow further and further. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. And I think it's so important. I think the overriding message I got from that is if we have all this data, we can use it to almost anticipate the future and plan ahead rather than just pivot and change maybe in the short term. But I think that relates to a point that Fiona wanted to raise on how mobility might change. And one of the issues that we discussed planning this is what compliance is going to look like and how that might change on the side of the industry that we work in. Fiona, do you want to give us your thoughts on that?
Yes, Ben, and I also would bring in Marco on it because the data side is going to be so important. My belief is that compliance is becoming even more a number one subject for global mobility. And this includes, I mean, it's so huge what we're required to look at now. So yes, Juliana, tax, that's obvious, it's number one. Social security, and social security, I mean, today, what are we talking about? Bilateral agreements, EU directives, posted workers, teleworkers, digital workers. Where are they working? Where is their employment contract? Comp and Ben, what is included in the package? Is that taxable income? Is it taxable in the home or the host country? And these are all subjects which today many of us have to deal with. And we're not experts. Juliana is an expert in two fields. I'm not an expert. So it means that you do have to start having with you partners who can help, who are going to be brought in either with you or you're going to send your clients to them. And this, I believe, is now going to be the new norm. The big four, yes, they're there. They're always going to be there. They have everything. It's in-house. But we see more and more companies, and surprisingly what we're seeing, and that's where I think the data is going to be interesting in the next 6 months, we're seeing quite large international firms who I would have thought had this sort of information in-house, and they don't, and they turn to you. So when you are an expert in your field and you're a trusted service provider, your client is going to be asking for that. So how did we start thinking about this? We started thinking about this actually pre-COVID because we became members of a network which is chartered accountants. Well, not chartered accountants, but just because we have more and more companies who are requesting this sort of information. And what fits, Ben, for some people doesn't fit for other people. So today, we all have to also start thinking about what is going to work for this client, A, B, and is not going to work for client C as well.
Thanks very much, Fiona. And I think we just got a comment come through from James about how automation is not meant to just, it's really meant to take care of the admin side of things, but we also need to focus on the customer. And this is your point, that we need to tailor our service, and it needs to be personal. It's going to have to get more personalized given the fact, the trends like remote working and digital nomad visas. I think just yesterday, another country announced that scheme. So I think we do need to deliver a more personal service. So thanks for your input, Fiona. I want to move on to Kunle. Kunle, one of the things that we talked about when we were discussing this first issue is how tech is important and it's vital, but it's not actually that easy and it's not that accessible for everyone. Wonder what your thoughts are in terms of the perspective in Nigeria or the broader region of Africa in terms of, yes, it's important, but how accessible is it in Africa?
So thank you very much, Ben, for that. So the thing about tech, and which was, I think we had an experience of it when we had the first call, and I lost connection as a result of the internet. It's something we are still struggling with across Africa, where some countries are still struggling with power generation. So you can imagine we are not even talking about automation at the moment. We're talking about basic power and meeting basic power needs. But looking at it from that perspective, what it also means for us as practitioners, whether in immigration or relocation or tax in Africa, is to ensure that we create relationships. These are binding relationships that over the years will grow, and they would know that, oh, this person is an expert in this particular area that they work. So it's important that one also creates bespoke services for the clients. Ordinarily, you would have cases where clients are trying to reach you by phone, for instance, and the service is bad, or you're having difficulty sending emails. So you must be able to ensure that, because you are in a country or you are in a continent that is struggling with basic things, that you have, first of all, a relationship with the client, and also a relationship with all the other service providers as well. I think automation is something that we are currently struggling with, but we are seeing that a lot of governments are starting to look at that. An example is the Nigerian Immigration Service that have recently introduced the e-visa, which it's an electronic visa which allows you to apply online, and you can apply for a visa. You don't necessarily have to submit the hard copies of the document. That is as a result of COVID. So and I think that's the same thing that applies in Ghana as well. So what that means, therefore, is that even the government are starting to react to the current situation of things, and I believe that's going to continue. And another thing we have seen is Africa is starting to look inwards. What I mean by looking inwards is that they are looking at how they can attract Africans that have gone, that have been in the diaspora for a while, and they've been able to get information or get trainings that there is still a knowledge gap with. So if I use Nigeria as an example now, what we've seen is that the government is trying to encourage a localization policy. So which means that if you're a Nigerian and maybe you schooled in the US and you've gained a lot of experience as a result of your schooling, the government is trying to encourage you to come back to the country to meet that knowledge gap. And we're seeing an increase in that. So what that means, therefore, is that there will be a lot more Africans moving back. So we're trying to, as much as possible, also limit the number of expats, I mean foreign expats that will be coming to the various countries at the end of the day. So the countries are actually looking inwards to see what they can do. And that is the policy that a lot of the various governments that are looking at the moment. So it's a case of, while we have been doing a lot of exportation of talent over the years, we are now trying to see how we can import back that talent to meet the knowledge and the skill gap at the moment. So I think that's what Africa is looking at, and Nigeria in particular.
That is so interesting, Kunle, and we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. Just for everyone watching, if you find this interesting, we will try and get onto questions, but if we don't, we'd like to continue this discussion. So let us know, or let Dom know and the team at Euro if it's something that you would like to hear more about. But just to wrap up the first sort of section, it's just really interesting how tech is very important, but we need to find the balance. So I think the general consensus is that we can use it. I think Ken made a great point about using it to streamline admin aspects, but in terms of service quality and service delivery, I think the general feeling is that it needs to remain personal. And I think chatbots are coming in more, but we're finding that actually it's not really delivering that human top level service that we all like to offer and we all offer as members of Euro. So I'm going to move on to more of the meat, and this is what really gets my juices flowing a little bit. So the next topic is about what solutions can we apply in global mobility to put more social focused initiatives or environmental initiatives at the core of our philosophy in a commercial sense. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because we don't have loads of time, but I was inspired. Another reason that inspired me to propose this topic was the concept of donut economics or circular economics, which was created by an economist called Kate Raworth. She wrote a book called Donut Economics, Ways to Think of the 21st Century Economist. And it was about the fact that we often prioritize growth, endless growth, as the only way of economic success. But actually what we should be doing now is trying to understand how important social initiatives need to be considered, and balancing out needs of the planet, environmental needs, with needs of society, with what people need to thrive all over the world. Now, I know this probably sounds slightly ideological and we have many things to worry about at the moment, but I do think it's an interesting topic on the topic of the area of purpose. So I'd like to go back to Juliana, if it's okay, Juliana. And I know we've spoken about this one-on-one, but also as a group. I know it's an idea that you find interesting. What measures have you prioritized or thought about in terms of benefiting either society or the environment in this time? And what do you think is important for the future of global mobility to try and weave this into our industry?
Okay, well, at a personal level, and of course as a business, I wonder what initiatives and what we could do as a community, what we could offer in general. So of course we had our values pre-COVID, but we are now more than ever talking about empathy. And I know you are passionate about this subject, as I am. And we tried at Relocation Houses to create initiatives like raising money to help people, foundations, and communities, creating opportunities to look each other, because now more than ever is emphasized the importance of this. So what we are trying, what we've been doing is looking for each other and how we as a community can create this new environment, helping with small things, with the day-to-day help.
Great, thanks very much, Juliana. I think that's such an important thing. Just the idea of the donut seems huge because it's about the planet or countries or cities, but actually it's about small things as well, like community projects or small things that firm can do, whether it's volunteering or the initiatives that you mentioned. So I appreciate that. I'm going to pass it on to Marco now. One of the ideas that Marco and I have discussed is something that we've defined as, or is defined as sustainable migration, and how we can make migration more inclusive for a wider group of people. Marco, would you like to just tell us a bit more about what sustainable migration is and how maybe we can incorporate it into our business practice?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Actually, we did a webinar, we prepared a webinar together with Ben a few days ago about this topic. And while we study some materials, we are amazed by some numbers. And we realized that according to the numbers circulated by United Nations and the International Organization for Migration, in 2019, there were about 270 million international migrants. And I think that many of us, I think that migrants, most of many international migrants are asylum seekers, refugees. In reality, two-thirds, so about 160 million migrants are economic migrants. And if we take out a small portion of what Ben and I we were discussing a few days ago about expats, so people who have the choice, you are asked to move from one country to the other, most often sponsored by a company, sent from one company to the other. All the others, economic migrants, they don't migrate for choice. They migrate for necessity. They migrate for finding new opportunities because in their own country they cannot find a job or a decent life. So right now the problem migration is a necessity. Making migration sustainable, it means that migration should become a choice. And how can it happen? Certainly Juliana is right. You know, Juliana raised a good point, and everyone knows that every one of us should do its best to facilitate, to take small action and small steps. But at macro level, at macro policy level, have been studied that some policies, there's a need of a stronger and more effective cooperation between destination countries and sending countries. Also taking into account that I told you about these numbers, but these numbers are most likely to worsen in the next few years for two reasons. One is COVID is related COVID and economics. COVID-19 has has restricted sharply international migrants. That means that the volume of remittances, which was in 2019 about 550 million US dollars, is expected to be reduced next year by 20 to 30%. The decrease in remittances will increase poverty in sending countries. Therefore, there will be a stronger push factor to have people leaving their own countries and seeking better opportunities in different countries. And what will be terrible is that due to the many countries are implementing anti-immigration policies, or if not anti-immigration policies, policies which are very selective and limited. So OECD has estimated that most OECD countries, which are the top 20 economies, are implementing more and more selective policies, trying to get the more highly skilled workers, for example. So the end result of all this, there will be most likely an increase of illegal immigration, because when people are not given opportunity to migrate legally and controlled, the only path will be going through a boat, like it's happening now in the Southern Europe, or from migrants coming from Libya or Tunisia and trying to reach Italy and Europe. And I don't want to talk long about the policies that can be implemented. Sending countries should be helped to improve their market policies, in the sense that improve migrant employability. So training and education program, especially with vocational schools in the country, in sending countries. And another very key point is facilitate what is called circular migration, two-ways migration. What happens right now, and many of these low-skilled migrants, when they move to another country, it's very difficult for them to return. They risk, if they leave Italy or Europe, they don't have any facilitation to return to Italy after some years. And this makes them stuck in Italy just to keep their permit valid. And this, what the next consequence is, they don't benefit. They are sending countries. So whenever they acquire skills or knowledge in Italy or in Europe or other developed countries, the policy would be to facilitate their possible return to their home country, because in this way they could help the economy of their own country to go further, and this would reduce the push factor for future migrants to come to develop the countries. And the last is pre-migration programs. What happens now is that many migrants are not employable. Low-skilled migrants are not employable in the country of arrival. And this make a problem with integration, problem with anti-immigration policies, problem with integration. In reality, if they would receive not only education in terms of training and skills, but also in terms of cultural values. Before arriving in the country of destination, this would facilitate their arrival and possible integration in the country of destination. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Marco. I think it's such a huge topic that we can, again, potentially take forward. Kunle, just really quickly, if it's okay, but it seems to be the case in Nigeria. Very briefly speaking, you mentioned the localization policies, and is that something that's already, in a way, already taking place in Africa generally then? There's a focus on bringing people back. I think that's what you mentioned.
Yes, just jumping off what Marco was saying, I think it's something that a lot of African countries are looking at. If I use Nigeria for an example, we now have a localization policy in the oil and gas industry, which is our biggest industry. It's expected that companies would have, for each foreign hire that they have, they need to have local understudies that would understudy them through the program. And it's expected that after the foreign expert leaves the country, that the local understudies will take over. We've also seen, what I have also seen practically is that, for example, in Nigeria, there are a lot of Nigerian engineers in the oil and gas industry. And there's been a lot of movement of Nigerian engineers to places like Ghana, where they've just discovered oil, and places like Mozambique and the DR Congo as well. So what we've seen is that it's cheaper for you to have a Nigerian engineer move to somewhere like Mozambique instead of having to bring an engineer from Houston. So in a sense, what the governments are starting to look at is to see how they can inwardly bring back individuals that have nationals, their own nationals that have lived abroad or they've worked abroad, and at the back of that be able to now match that skill gap. So I think it's something that a lot of African governments are looking at. As Marco said, I think it's important that the European governments, because they are the ones that are actually struggling with the illegal migration now of Africans. They also look at how they can make investments with regards to African countries that they see their numbers are actually having to do this illegal migration. So you go to those countries and make investments to see how you can improve their economies. So because if their economies are improved, then there's more opportunity for them, and there's no need for them to take the risk of trying to get into Europe. So it's important that we also start to look at that as well to ensure sustainable migration, as Marco mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Kunle. I totally agree. My personal opinion is Africa needs a bit more of a voice in global mobility generally. Maybe that's partly because my family are from Africa, but I do think it's good to learn about what's going on. So I really appreciate you giving us that information. Fiona, I'd like to pass it on to you if I can to just close this chapter. And one thing that it highlights is the importance of purpose in what we do. I know that you're really passionate about this topic, so I'll just pass it on to you if you can just give us your thoughts on that.
Well, it actually is going to tie in with what everybody's said on the topic, Juliana, Marco, and Kunle. I think that COVID, for absolutely everybody in our industry, we've seen a huge surge in our search for purpose. That there is a huge increase in community, local activities, wanting to help. Aura has always been incredibly generous and thought up ideas. Behind me, there's this picture. I know that there's always an auction for a charity at every single one of the conferences, but those are very small actions. And so what is your purpose? I mean, we have a purpose which is about training young people. I know we're going to develop this a little bit more in the next section, because it is important that, yes, we take underskilled people, we train them, and we show that that is one of the purposes of the company. But my question is, what can we as the industry find as a large purpose for everybody? So you could take something like, and I'm going to give the example of the French politician, Jean-Louis Borloo, who started up a program which is Energy for Africa, and it was to bring electricity massively into Africa through various programs, because in 2015, and I hope that the figures have changed, there were 650 million people in Africa who did not have electricity. How can you possibly think about trying to educate people and children if they don't even have the electricity to be able to read? It's not possible. So there are, in my opinion, really subjects to think about for us as an industry to work on to find purpose.
Sorry,
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, Fiona, just mention briefly, because you have a personal experience about training someone and sending back.
Okay, so yeah, my personal experience is the most wonderful thing that happened to me, and it's the thing that I'm the proudest of, because I didn't really do anything here. We have in India a very young cleaning boy, and one's lucky. We have these people, very lucky, and I noticed that he's extremely efficient, extremely clean, and he speaks very good English. And at one moment I think to myself, but seriously, I mean, this person should be doing something else rather than just cleaning and serving tea. There's something else he could do. Now, it took us 2 years. Well, it took me, first of all, 2 years to understand that he didn't have to have his high school certificate to move into an admin position, but that was a misunderstanding. And it took 2 years to get both the team, who were actually very proud of helping him, and him to accept, first of all, that he could sit down and have lunch with us. And then now he actually has an admin role and he enters data. Now, it's a long process to get there, but you can all do this. And I'm sure that masses of people do this. But the sense of purpose that you bring to your own team is absolutely fantastic. I mean, my team, it's one of the things that they're the proudest of is having Jacob now actually having a role inside the office, and he's not cleaning.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a really great story, and it's just shows, you know, that the whole idea of doing something with a social benefit doesn't have to be changing the world. It can just be one small thing that could actually be a huge thing. So thank you, Fiona. I'm going to have to ask you all to keep your responses for the next section quite short, if possible, so we can finish off. But I want to talk about community collaboration quickly, and that can be many things. It can be huge communities or small communities or different networks we're a part of. And I want to quickly go back to Kunle. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel the rhetoric around global mobility is often about North America or Europe, lesser about Africa. And part of my research led me to learning about the African Union and what's going on there, and what Africa as a region is trying to do to encourage migration. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that, if you can, in terms of what's going on as a community in Africa and the African Union?
Thank you very much. So the African Union recently had a treaty that was signed in July 2019. It's called the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So there are, for some that do not know, there are 54 countries in 55 countries in Africa at the moment. It used to be 54, but because of South Sudan, so it's now 55 countries. And 54 of those countries have signed that treaty. So what that treaty allows is for free movement of goods and services. So you can imagine free movement of goods and services within the continent of Africa, which means that it will definitely ensure economic growth. We would see a lot of migrants moving as well, a lot of economic migrant movement as well. The treaty was supposed to start, I think, February or March 2020. However, because of COVID, it's been pushed forward. But I think it's really going to cause a huge economic growth in Africa. and all the African countries are also going to benefit as a result of this agreement.
Thanks, Kunle. It's so interesting to see, because here in Europe, we just talk about Brexit all the time and divisions between the UK and the EU. And it was just interesting to see that the Swiss vote was more promising, but it's good to see that in other regions, there is more unity and attempts to encourage integration. In terms of other networks, Fiona, you had a really interesting idea about what we could potentially do maybe within Eura. I'd love to hear what that is, so that you could share it with everyone watching.
So one of the ideas and suggestions that I think the group would like to make is, first of all, yes, URA has this fabulous MIM training program. But I believe that if you want to have people in the relocation industry and you want them also to have empathy, whether it's empathy with their clients or empathy within the group of their company and employees, there's got to be a lot of intercultural exchange about this. And without traveling, I don't see really how people can gain this. I mean, we can all watch Netflix or, I don't know, Shakespearean plays and Italian drama, but you've still got to live in the country some of the time, not necessarily speak the language fluently, but live in the country. So there are a lot of other programs which slightly inspired me, like Erasmus, you've got the lifelong learning program in the EU, you've got the ISEP program. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we actually could start up an exchange program for junior staff for 1 year to travel the world amongst ourselves, amongst URA members, so that you could do the example that I could have a team member who's going to spend 1 month in Italy. That's very easy, it's Europe. But what about if they went and spent 3 months working on immigration with Kunle in Africa, and then they hopped over to Brazil to work with Juliana? I could really have somebody who comes back who has gained in 1 year more knowledge than most people are going to gain in 5 sitting in their office.
Thanks, Fiona. I think that's an amazing idea, which is tricky at the moment, but it sounds great. But I still think we could potentially start something like that now, in terms of connecting people digitally, having conversations a week or
especially junior staff. Who don't have the opportunity of getting on these calls, of necessarily even attending conferences like this. One should encourage them amongst firms that we work together of setting up group discussions, even coffee shops.
I totally agree. I think that's a great idea. Going to shift to Juliana quickly. One of the things that you and I have talked about is how we have so many new ideas, and there are existing communities like Eura or the ERC. But in LATAM, something that's quite interesting is that there's new groups and new discussions have started. Juliana, do you want to just tell us about what's been happening there and just go into a bit more detail about that side of things?
Yeah, sure. Well, despite this social distance, I think we are more connected now, even with people outside of the normal circles that we used to have. So in Brazil, we have a very interesting community created by Patrícia Tavares. She's the head of Unilever here in Brazil, and she created a community called Brazil Talks. And she brings people from the industry and also outside from the industry to talk about the practices and what's going on with immigration, taxation, not only on the provider side, but also the corporate side. So I think this kind of community is very interesting to us. So because at the same time, we can educate each other and we can learn, we can share our experiences, the way we are dealing, the way we are facing this moment. And I think this has a link with Fiona mentioned, about training people and giving them the opportunity to be part of the community, to be part of the ideas and the environment that we are creating now.
Yeah, thanks, Juliana. And just to clarify, Brazil Talks is for everyone. Anyone can attend. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
For free for everyone.
Yeah, and it sounds a bit odd, but I know, and we may be uncomfortable, but I actually joined a Brazil Talks discussion about a week or so ago, and I would encourage people even though it's not familiar to them, to jump in and just explore new groups. It could be something in Brazil, or people outside of mobility. These connections and stepping into an uncomfortable zone can lead to new ways of thinking. And I think Brazil Talks is a great example of that. So thank you, Giovanna. Just really quickly, because I want to give some time to the last point, because it's an interesting one, the last paragraph, the last topic. Marco, one thing that we've talked about when I came to see you recently was that we want change in the industry, particularly certain countries where it's difficult, and we want to create change and have connections with people that can lead to that. Do you think it's important to collaborate together between relocation, immigration, and tax? And what can we do if we come together to potentially lobby government to create change? How important do you think that is?
Definitely is very important. The problem is that it depends country by country. While, for example, lobbying at the EU level in Brussels, I think is effective and is very well consolidated and is regulated. In country, Italy is still lobbying seen as not illegal, but a very murky activities. And for surely happens. But with all my efforts that I do, not for lobbying, but for getting answers from various ministries whenever we have an unclear situation, also with the help of a bigger association of large clients, I tell you, it's not very effective. So the fact that there could be a more community level activity or pressure in order, and for Europe, not only at national level. What is important is that, fortunately, in my view, Europe is more and more integrated. Despite, unfortunately, Brexit, so Britain leaving the EU, I think is inevitable, and I hope is inevitable for European Union to become more integrated. That's why we shouldn't focus only on lobbying, on pressuring the national authorities, because any decision right now, if you look at the Schengen area, there's a free movement area. So whenever you enter in one country, you can freely travel to the others. So the entry of someone can impact also the other Schengen members.
Thanks so much, Marco. I think that's such an important point, and so much meat to that, to hopefully have a further conversation about this with other people on the panel, but other people watching as well. I want to move on to the final topic. We've got literally 10 minutes, so if you can all speak for a couple of minutes each, but I'll start with you, Marco. You and I had some really interesting conversations recently about the huge amount of experience you have in the industry. It's over 30 years. And we want to talk about legacies and thinking long-term to have an impact on global mobility. I wonder what your final thoughts and final advice could be to those of us who have that similar experience, but also that are starting out in global mobility, as to how and why we can remain relevant and keep the motivation and stamina, and what advice you would give to people watching, because you have so much experience and such a great reputation in the industry.
The advice is quite simple for I think it works for any business right now, because the economy is moving so fast. So whatever you acquire today, your model must be continuously readjusted. That's what I'm trying to do with I'm now 60, but still struggling and say, what will happen next year? Because I don't give for granted what I have now. We all have experienced the COVID crisis. I mean, some firms have struggled more, some firms have struggled less, but we didn't expect such a huge impact on our economy, for all kinds of economies. So, and then COVID, the next year can be another crisis, can be, unfortunately, hope no, but there can be a war in one country. So in a war so globalized, something that happens in China can impact your business or our life. So be ready and technology is very important in all facts, all aspects of our business, to be following continuously the technological advancements and change continuously, be ready to change your business model.
Thank you, Marco. That's really insightful, so I appreciate it. Fiona, similar question, well, the same question to you, but before I say that, happy 17th birthday for the Expat Partners, is that right?
Yes.
So that's a great landmark, so congratulations. And on that note, how would you answer that question?
So very, very similar to Marco. First of all, I do believe you can learn from the past. You should look at things that have happened historically. How did people adapt? And so you've got to take what we're living today, document it, to think, okay, next time round, am I going to be ready? Can I adapt to this? Yes, you've got to be nimble, very nimble. You've got to adapt. And you've got to keep ahead of all this technology constantly. I'm fascinated by it. You've said, Ben, get out of your comfort zone. That is super important. I mean, I've had discussions with people like from Yotengo Bot. I don't know anything about a chatbot. I've done like Marco, I've abandoned it, but you've got to try, you've got to get into these areas because that's the way forward.
Thanks so much, Fiona. And one trend I would notice I've had similar conversations with you and Marco, but one trend between both of your teams is that you also have to keep young and dynamic people around you, I think, and have fresh ideas and change those ideas as well. So I think that's really important. So thanks so much for sharing that, Fiona. Kunle, I want to move on to you if it's okay. We've talked about legacies and thinking long term. Another topic of the forum is actually staying resilient. You and I hope you don't mind me saying, but you and I are friends on Facebook. And you post lots of stuff about football, and I ignore that because it's usually against Arsenal. But you also post lots of messages that are positive and they genuinely inspire me actually when I see them. And I think one thing that we need to address here is how important it is to be resilient, personally, but also commercially. And I'd love to have your thoughts on what we can learn on that side of things from you.
Okay, I hope one day you end up supporting Manchester United. So the thing is, even before the COVID, we've seen that the world has been in a flux. So what that means, therefore, is that things are changing rapidly. And we have to keep in mind that, first of all, for us, we've tried as much as possible to be as flexible as possible. So we had started actually working from home before the COVID happened, and in a sense, what that means, therefore, it's been easy for us to go ahead with it. And also, one has to be open-minded as well, because we are in periods when, as Marco, although I don't want to be a harbinger of doom, we don't know what next year holds. So we're still struggling, and definitely the effect of COVID is going to spill over into next year. So in a sense, what that means, therefore, is you have to be open-minded as well. And for me, the third thing is you have to be better. You just have to try to be better in all things. So if for instance, Ben sees my message and I know that lots of people see the message and maybe they are feeling depressed or something, that will definitely encourage them. And you don't know how far that message will go. So expect more messages, expect more messages on Facebook. But the whole idea is we just have to be better.
Yeah.
We can't remain where we are. We have to be better than where we were.
I think that's so important. We need to plan in advance and also be agile and flexible and keep them coming, because it's good to wake up to seeing people sharing positivity and hope. And what I've tried to do today with all of you is be hopeful. So thank you, Kunle. I want to give the last word to Juliana. I know there's so many comments, so it's a bit difficult. Not necessarily the last opinion though, but I want to give you the last word, Juliana, and I'll explain myself. You and I had a great conversation yesterday on the future, and we talked a little bit about future generations. And actually we ended up talking about children, which was really interesting. Because you have a daughter, Louisa. And the conclusion of that discussion, Juliana, was that actually perhaps we underestimate the intelligence and the wisdom of children. And I know Sophie and Maud have mentioned things about maybe we're too old as well, so it kind of ties into that. But Juliana, if I can ask you to put your shoes in the head of Lou, what advice would Lou give to us in the global mobility industry for us to be brilliant now so that we can benefit her generation and generations beyond her generation? What would she tell us to do so that we can really shine right now?
That's a very good question, Ben. Well, I would say to keep the curiosity, of course, and making meaningful connections, because we are all humans. So we are here for that, to make connections and to keep the positivity, to exchange our knowledge and to laugh at each other and to learn how, I would say, this is what I try all the time when I talk to her, to understand her feelings and to educate her for the future. Because even now, with 5 years, I think she can understand and she can prepare for the future generations and the way we want to see the world from now on. So I would say keep it the curiosity, and that's it.
Thank you. No, thanks, Juliana. That's a great answer, and I really appreciate it. And I think creativity as well. We underestimate how creative and actually outside the box younger people can be. And it's really interesting because we always see conversations about the future of global mobility or the future of the economy. Well, if we want to talk about the future, I think we need to include younger people in that discussion. And you know, actually see where they are. And I know Fiona has talked about the roots of empathy and how that involves children as well. And so the people with more experience are learning from the younger people, and the younger people are learning from the people with more experience. And we all need to kind of work together. I've not been able to go into all the comments and questions, but I hope the people watching have enjoyed the session. And if you have questions, you please do contact us or contact Dom and say you want to hear more of what we might have to say, and Alistair can be involved in that. But I'd just like to wrap up. We've got about a minute left. So thank you, Fiona. Happy birthday. Thank you, Marco. Welcome to Eura. Thank you, Juliana and Lou, for her opinion as well. Happy Independence Day, Kunle, as well. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the day off. And thank you all for watching. I hope you really enjoyed the session. I hope it made you curious, and I hope you have some ideas that you can share with us as a community going forwards, and enjoy the rest of the forum. Thanks so much. Let's keep talking. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
Ben.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.